Hello, friends and extended family. Brian James here, and I guess we're going to try and tackle what went on over the last few months. And I can say that a lot of it has to do with mental illness, not only my own, but others. Now, I know that I've talked to a few of you, and I present well, I speak well. And when I talk about mental illness, um, I'm including the majority of you as well as mentally ill. And by mentally ill, I simply mean that we have behaviors that cause ourselves problems and cause other people problems that we're oblivious to, and that we act out unconsciously. So, what are some of my issues? Well, I think I've mentioned to you that in going through the DSM, doing some psychoanalysis on myself, that I do have some borderline personality disorder traits, ADHD, and that stems from smoking, which, well, and being introduced to smoking as a baby and as a child. Um, to do with the high addiction of cigarettes, and the studies were done in Spain. So if you ever want to look that up, just Google Spain um, ADHD linked to tobacco, um, as well as things like passive aggressive behavior. I suffer from that, and that tends to manifest around sexuality sometimes. Um, so all these things taken together, combined, seasonal affective disorder, alcoholism, addiction, blah blah blah. You take them all together, and if you're not willing to change, if you're not willing to address these things, then life is going to be a roller coaster for sure. And my life has been a roller coaster, and I can see that in the masses. I can see that in society. I can see that going on the news. It's everywhere. And it was Jay Krishnamurti who said it. It's no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society. So that being said, I can look at a lot of people I know. You can look at yourselves and people you know, and people that seem to be getting along just fine in society. And don't get me wrong, I've had my long stretches of winning at life. Um, but inevitably, you come to these maybe you could call them moments of clarity, the gift of tragedy, um, whatever it may be, where things fall apart. And you don't necessarily want to hold things together because, like I get to places in my life whereas, I've got the job, I've got the routine, I'm making money, I'm getting ahead. I've got a girlfriend, I've got some friends, and you know what? If I sit in that and it's not, sometimes it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. And when that happens, I think subconsciously something takes place whereas we will crash that situation to escape it because something is telling us you got to get out of this. And when I look at a life of someone, say for example, who didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't get into any trouble, went to school, got above average grades, never missed a class, did their homework on time, uh, went to university, got a job, got married, had the one children or whatever it is. Um, uh, just went to work, did their duty, blah 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 blah. All these things. Went home after work, watched their, three hours of television, ate their dinner, ate their 3 meals a day, followed all the food and drug guidelines, and watched the mainstream programming. Well, when I get into some sort of scenario along those lines, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. And I honestly couldn't imagine that life. Although I can certainly appreciate the security that would go along with that, the comfort level, a lot of things that could go along with that. But I don't think that's what life is about. I think life is about experiencing new things, learning, education, growth. And to do all those things, well, you have to step outside that comfort zone. So, what happened for me? Well, I was seeing a woman about a year and a half ago. We started seeing each other, and me being a codependent, I mean, that's a hard one. I'm an adoptee, so I feel that part of that codependency stems from that horrible disconnection that I've felt throughout my life. And, I didn't really bond with my adoptive family. So, being in that home, I was alone. I couldn't wait to get out of that house to someone I could connect with. And that's been my life, trying to connect with people and on higher and higher and higher levels. And sexuality was an intimacy that I suppose would be most akin to having a familiar connection, a biological family connection, maybe. And of course, I mean, since that was sort of, taken away, um, I can see it in other people, but I've never really truly experienced it myself, besides a short stint with my birth father and their family, and a little bit with my birth mother, but not so much. And anyways, I feel that perhaps that's where that stemmed from, and being conscious of it, it helps. It helps in all areas of this journey. When I become conscious of something and I can attach it to some reason, it helps me overcome it. So I firmly believe that through education of ourselves, psychologically, spiritually, mentally, um, that we can overcome these things. Just like alcoholism, drug addiction, all these things, I feel that if someone can educate themselves to a certain degree, at the very least to a spiritual level, I think that's a curable disease that can be kiboshed. And I'll let you know more about that as I progress through my own recovery time, which is 5 years of sobriety just about. So what happened? Well, I was seeing a woman. I was renting a room from a friend. I was looking to get into the city and to attend a program at the university here. And throughout that, as I was seeing this woman, we became closer and things were going well. And for me and my experience in my life, um, you get closer to a woman, you get along, you blah blah blah, and eventually you cohabitate. That's just how that goes. This scenario didn't work out quite that like that. She has two teenage children, and from where she was married for 20 years. And anyways, I mean that wasn't how they did things. They did things much slower and blah blah blah. And either which way, it didn't come to a place where cohabitation was going to be possible with this woman. Well, being a codependent, and feeling a need to cohabitate with someone else, and knowing that if I say, for example, cohabitate with another man or a male, then I'm a different sort of person. I absorb that sort of energy, and I end up in a sort of bachelor sort of mentality, and it's this it's a whole different frame of mind. Living on my own can be a negative as well, because I will lean very much towards agoraphobia. I will slowly isolate, and if I get into my hyper focus with books or with video games or whatever it may be, um, I don't necessarily come out of it to look after myself, or to do things. So, you know, in those scenarios for me when I was living out in BC, and on my own, well, fasting and things like that became really easy because I would just go into hyper focus and I wouldn't worry about those things. So, all that being said, under a program of vigorous honesty, um, I eventually had a void to fill. So I explored the idea of non-monogamy, and ended up reconnecting with an ex, and explaining that I wasn't in a position, explaining where I was at, and slowly but surely I maneuvered myself into a non-monogamous relationship with two women, and it didn't go so great. So, um, the one that I started seeing a year and a half ago is still in my life, and I love her dearly, and I bashed my head against the wall of how we have got ourselves into a situation where we're apart. We want to be together, but it's just not quite possible. Um, and especially with my situation where I'm not working, I'm working on myself. I'm sort of living outside of society, and not participating. That's that's a hard thing to wrap your head around for um, some people. Well, for most people, I think. And yeah, so what went on was I had a history with the second woman, and it wasn't a good history at all. I mean, she had been doing her own work with mental health. She had gotten a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder as well. Um, and I took that as almost a wishful thinking sort of scenario, because in knowing what I know now, I know that without accepting that I have my own disorders, and I'm not quite right, and I need work. Um, Without accepting those things, you live in this ego world where you're trying to defend all your bad behaviors as justifiable all the time. So this person, although getting the diagnosis, having a mental crash and ending up, down in the psych ward or whatnot, and then getting into her own program, um, she went through the program, enjoyed some of the benefits, participated, but did not necessarily accept the diagnosis. And instead of treating, looking for treatment for that borderline personality disorder, which would have been dialectical behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, she just took the drugs, right? And it there wasn't a full acceptance on her part. And I guess I personally got excited because, well, oh, she's doing work, and there was a reconnection with some people in her life that had been alienated and whatnot. And anyways, so then we moved towards a cohabitation scenario, and tried to lay down the ground rules of how this would work out. Now, I don't want you to think that I was trying to be a swinger. That wasn't really the goal here. It was simply trying to get my needs met as they stand and sit now while I'm working on so many things at once. Um, the codependency thing, well, I mean, this extremely negative situation in cohabitating, well, I mean, it was almost a dose of helping with cohabitation problems or codependency problems because, wow, I just was trapped in a toxic situation where I've already, been annihilated financially. Uh, my whole logic of the system is shattered due to misaligned legislation all over the place, due to legal issues that have gone on with my license, and the system in Canada in general. Um, so, so needless to say, I was in a very vulnerable place to be taking on someone's vitriol that was directed at me, which was basically just projection of herself onto me and her own insecurities constantly. I could sit there and listen to her yelling and screaming, and I could hear. It was like, it was like her everything she was doing to me, she was blaming me for. So, it was pretty horrific. And then I got to watch also the normalization, right? So everything I did for that person was expected. Um, and if then at some point I was sick and didn't do, say for example, I didn't mow the lawn. Um, well then, well that was a problem. So it was hard to live in it and see it, and it was also hard to be aware of it because when you're aware that someone's having an episode, you realize that they don't know what they're doing while they're doing it, and they want to fight. They want to go at it, and they want to have at it. And it was a lot to take. And normally I will bring out the intellect and I will go to town on that person. That used to be my go-to because I'm quick-witted, and if you want to get into a heated argument with me, well, you'll have a hard time because I'm fast. I'm quick on my feet when it comes to these sort of things, and I have a lot of knowledge to pull from. But instead, I tried my best to not engage and to simply try to realize that this thing is an internal battle with that person, not with me, although it's being directed at me. So yeah, I do what I do. I fawned, I froze, right? So I just, cut off contact with you folks. I cut off contact with the outside world. And then I just kind of hid. And I went into my hyper focus. And, I video gamed it up and I hid in that room. And things got really out of control there. And there was another aspect to the whole thing that I noticed that the three big events all happen on full moons. Now, I don't know, I'd have to ask an astrologer on that one, but those three full moons were over the top, ridiculous, trying to kick me out at Christmas time. Well, kicking me out at Christmas time, actually. because that person simply couldn't be a civil adult. The solution to the whole problem was, you know what? We tried this out, and you know what? It doesn't really work. Um, so let's just work together to separate, and we'll go our separate ways. That's all it was, right? That's all that needed to be done. But this person had to try to tear me down because of their own insecurities about what was going on. Um, and as far as insecurities go, I mean, over the years, I've become much, much less shallow on a physical level than I have before. But I can tell you that, if someone's very kind and honest and friendly and, helpful, well, it's a lot easier to overlook their physical flaws, right? I'm sure you've all had the experience whereas you meet someone and wow, you're super attracted to them, but as they talk and as you get to know them, they just become repulsive. Or there's the opposite scenario where you meet someone and you're not attracted to them at all, but then as you get to know them and you talk with them and they become much more attractive. Well, I mean, this is yeah, this is the hard part I have is discernment of what's hiding inside people. And on top of that, overlooking red flags and flaws because of wishful thinking, and also on my own part, in that, you know, you want to combine forces with someone to make your life a little bit easier as well. So, needless to say, it was an unpleasant experience, but it was very educational, absolutely. And now that it's over, I'm glad that it's something I have for my experiential knowledge um, of how dangerous someone with borderline personality disorder can be um, if you give them the some power over you to hurt you when their idealization phase turns to the villainization phase. Because that's it. You're either perfect and great and you're loved, or you're scum and you're conspiring to hurt them and blah 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 and you're this terrible villain. And it's a switch. It just goes off. So I won't get into any of the minor details, this, that, and the other, but you know, I mean, when you're in a survival sort of state of being, you're working on yourself, not getting much help from the society in general. Um, yeah, yeah, you're vulnerable to making some poor decisions um, to try and get a leg up. So that's kind of what happened here, and it was an interesting scenario to watch, and I think ultimately it brought me and the other woman much closer together, not on a not cohabitating, but I think it helped us go through a trying time, and it also was a crisis, and this person was really there for me during that crisis. So that's something because certainly you really find out a person's character when the cards are down and you need them. Um, because a lot of people just aren't there when the cards are down. And is that the right term? Cards are down. You know what I mean. So that was that. Um, So I'm going to be going into my 18-week course here at the university starting on Monday. So I'm pretty excited to do that, and I'll keep you updated as to how that goes. Um, I'm going in optimistically. Um, I'm hoping for the best. I don't have a lot of good experience with Canadian mental health or medical health here, but the university here is a stand-up place. I've heard really great things. Obviously, it wasn't enough for this person I had lived with, but you know, that seems to be, well, maybe it was the choice to choose the medication over a treatment program to try and deal with your issues. So that's kind of what happened. If you have questions about that, I mean, leave it in the comments. I know my friend Lisa O in the comments there had, it's probably a woman. I'm like, yeah, yeah, it was, and that's what happened. Um, as well, I've joined I've found a spiritual organization to join. I'm not going to name it. People have their biases of this, that, and the other. Um, if anyone's interested, they can always email me. But I think it looks like a good fit for me. It's not a preachy organization. It's more hands-on, practical work, getting in touch with natural laws, things like that, and working on self, psychologically, spiritually, from a lot of different angles, and picking up some higher learning with the organization. So I'm excited to do that as well. Um, what else can I tell you? Adoption. Well, I've kind of eased up a little bit on the adoption groups because I've noticed a trend. And please feel free to comment if you've also noticed this. But on the few occasions I have taken some time and got into the comments on the anti-adoption groups through Facebook and whatnot, um, I found that there seemed to be a whole slew of, um, I believe they're called third wave feminists, using terms like toxic masculinity, basically telling men to shut up to do with women's reproductive choices, etc., etc., etc. Now, please understand that I am pro-choice. In fact, I'm much like when I say pro-choice, I mean I'm pro a woman deciding to abort if she so chooses, and I'm pro a woman keeping her child if she so chooses. I'm not pro adoption at all. That's not a woman's choice. You're that there's a person being born and you're making a choice for them. And I think anyone could say, at any age, just about, as long as they're able to speak, if they were asked, we would like to take you away from your family right now. We're not going to tell you where we're going to take you. Supposedly a better life, but we're the government. So trust us as much as you trust your government. And unfortunately, I think too many people trust their government way too much these days. Um, so all those things being said, when we're discussing anti-adoption in an adoption group, um, these are topics that are going to come up. And as a male adoptee, well, I think it's okay for me to have an opinion on what happened to my family and my mother and her choice that affected my entire life. So if you're a third wave feminist, and you're in an adoption group, shut up. Shut your fucking mouth. Because I watched these women go to town on these guys, to do with opinions about abortion and this and this and this. And we were all talking very objectively. We weren't insulting anyone. We were simply, you know, having a debate about these things. And these women were being quite nasty and rude to the men in the group. Like, I'm sorry, are only women who were adopted allowed to have opinions about adoption and about the other options that were available that have now, dictated their lives? Grab a clue. And if you're an administrator and you see women calling out toxic masculinity or mansplaining or this sort of made up mumbo jumbo third wave feminist Marxist propaganda, get them the hell out of there. As it stands, I might as well start my own group and I would just turf these idiots right off the bat. Yeah. I mean, yeah. You want equal rights, right? Yeah. Well, you've got equal rights now in the world. And yeah, women get assaulted by men. Absolutely. And that's horrible. And we have laws on the books, so call the police and they'll go to jail. But the problem is that there's also terrible women in the world, right? Can we not agree that there's also terrible women in the world, and men, and blacks, and browns, and whites, and greens? There's good and bad in all groups, so there's no getting around that. But at the end of the day, if you turn around and you make these laws so lopsided, well, all you've done now is you have terrible men beating up women, and now you have terrible women calling the police, telling them that their good men are beating them up, etc., etc., or trying to have them beat up. I don't know how many times I've heard women trying to get their boyfriends beat up because they broke up with them or hurt their feelings or this, that, and the other. It's like, okay, so you're a violent person and abusive, right? Yeah. Yeah, our world is in desperate need of I don't know. Like I sometimes feel like we need, hundreds and hundreds of insane asylums all over the place. Because some of these people should not be walking around on the streets. They're absolutely insane. And this is why I go and am going and am working on my own mental health. Because I don't know what to do. I'm surrounded by violent, abusive lunatics always. I mean, no wonder I want to hibernate and be by myself. The amount of abuse I've suffered in my life, in this secular atheist crap life, is astounding. Astounding. And I'm coming to a terrible realization, whereas I need a law degree before I feel safe going back out into the world. As well, to deal with bureaucracy, and I know this is the answer, is that I need to record every interaction I have with any of these people at all times and get as much information about them as I can. I need to be a cop, a lawyer, a private investigator, my own doctor, my own psychologist. If you want something done right, do it yourself. But, I mean, give me a break. Is there not some form of society that I can join? Whereas, hey, here's a guy who knows about adoption. Great. I would love to help anyone who wants to know about the darker side of adoption. I will happily go through it with you. I will talk about my feelings honestly. I will explain, whatever I can to help you. I worked in the car industry. If you need help buying a car, not getting ripped off on what's a good vehicle, what's blah 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 blah, I will help any of you do these things. Whatever you want. Anything I'm good at, it's a joy and a privilege to help others if I can. I love to feel useful. But unfortunately, the world I live in, it's not about people asking for help. They're trying to take, right? Women out there hunting down babies or hunting down men with money so that they can get a $10,000 paycheck. You know, it happens. It happens a lot. A lot. Like a lot. And it's horrifying to admit it because what do you say? What do you say about the mother of your child? I mean, God, I don't even know. And then, growing up, being adopted and knowing that, well, your mother in the 70s had a child out of wedlock. She was a slut. So she went away and they hid that. But I'm not saying she was a slut, but that was the conservative mentality of those times that turned around and tried to hide the behavior by abandoning a member of their family. So again, that's horrible, horrible, horrible behavior on the conservative side of things. But at the end of the day, if the conservative side and the liberal side cannot admit that they both are horrible, then we're never going to get anywhere. It's just this finger pointing bullshit constantly going on. The answer lies with ourselves. It's just like this drinking and driving fiasco. They don't want to solve drinking and driving because they're making money on the booze, you idiots. They want to sell tons and tons of booze. And then what do they want to do when you get in trouble from drinking all the booze? They want to charge you in the courts and the police station and the fines and the this and the that. And the blow box wants to get in on the money, right? Just like the children. Children out of wedlock. Well, I mean, do you think the courts in Canada is going to give up on, and the lawyers are going to give up on the millions and billions of dollar industry of wrecking families? So who's doing these things? Someone. Someone is. Think about it. I don't know. I don't got any answers there. I'm just trying to unwind myself from it. But when you guys figure it out, let me know. Or if you want to help out, I mean, let me know. Throw me on a startup. I don't know. I guess I've come to a place of charity. All right. So, anyways, I've gotten sidetracked. I've gotten off topic, but that's the basic premise of what happened. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I mean, as it stands now, my life as an adoptee, to me, is simply now a clinical study, as it always has been. It's an experiment, and now I get to see what happens when a person of my, lineage, my intellect, my physical attributes is put in a situation like this. Well, what's the outcome? Where do we get to? And if that person can be honest and admit their own flaws, as I try to do, well, we can come up with some answers. But it has to be honest. You can't just bullshit, and unfortunately that's the thing. So yeah. Hopefully that answered a few questions, and I know it was probably a little confusing because there's so much that I've gotten behind on with my videos that I'm trying to put it all in here, but I don't even know how long I'm going here. Ooh, 40 minutes. Ooh. So I'll let you go for today, and I'll try and pick it up, and you ask the questions, I will answer them, and we'll try to sort myself out, and hopefully in sorting myself out that some of you also get sorted out. So peace, love, happiness. Be honest, be real, admit you're crazy, work on it, and go from there. There's no shame in admitting that you've been following the herd to a very bad place, and it's time to back up a little bit and do a little work on ourselves and get ourselves to a place of sanity, right? Because if we keep following the herd, we are following it into Bedlam, as far as I can see. Thanks. Good night.